Greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It is Saturday, July 5th, 2025. And on Saturdays, we talk about sports and sometimes add a little bit of humor, etc. The theme of the Dr. J Vlog series this week has been improving the world. So today, in relation to sports, we're going to talk about improving the world through youth sports in particular. Now, speaking personally, I've always enjoyed sports growing up, especially as a youngster. I played sports year round. Quite frankly, every season there was a new sport, and sometimes two sports because we did swimming year round. But sports is also a bit of a double-edged sword, so to speak. Okay, so on the one hand, there are the many different positives associated with participating in sports, from the social to the psychological to the health benefits and so on, which I'm going to discuss momentarily. But on the other hand, we also know that there's kind of a dark side to sports, or potentially, and especially youth sports. That is from the abusive coaches and parents, and some of whom do unspeakable sorts of things. But okay, those are the exceptions, obviously. But even just the issues around learning to be good sports, or the opposite, the lack of good sportsmanship. So that can be a problem. In my case, the downside was always my sort of hyper competitive nature, if you will, to the point where I could be a jerk at times, on the court or towards my teammates or towards the opposition, and so on. Thankfully, I eventually learned how to scale that back, and I was lucky enough to rekindle my love for sports as an adult, but without having to worry about the competitiveness or having to be the best or winning all the time and that sort of thing. I learned, for example, to still compete hard. I learned how to go out and play basketball hard. I would try, but I'd focus more on the enjoyment and the competition and, you know, just the fun of being out there, right? So all the benefits, rather than attaching my status or my happiness or my well-being to the idea of whether my team won or lost. I couldn't be bothered to worry about that, right? I hope that makes sense. So yeah, I could play hard and compete hard in men's leagues and that sort of thing, or just with my buddies, or with my children for that matter. But I valued just being there as an adult, right? The workouts, the camaraderie above all else. So if we won too, great. But that was just a bonus. Okay, so today I just want to talk a bit more about how to improve the world by focusing on the positive side of youth sports. Okay, so in addition to learning the new skills, etc., which I'll come back to, there's obviously a great many other lifelong benefits to participating in youth sports. In fact, the research has shown that young people who are physically active go on to become adults who are more productive at work, even have higher earnings on their jobs on average, and have lower levels of depression. Now, of course, more immediately, we actually have evidence that participating in youth sports, for example, does things like improve one's academic potential and performance. If you pursue competitive sports as a young person, you probably already have a more positive self-concept. And again, sports can be helpful in helping people to develop those positive self-images. You're also probably more likely to be goal-driven. And that sort of thing, of course, carries over into the classroom. In fact, several studies have found a link between youth sports and academic success, including a much higher than expected percentage of athletes who maintain an A average. Now, of course, one has to be careful, too, in the sense that sometimes the students are struggling with their academics, and they may devote too much time to the sports and to the fun stuff, right, rather than hitting the books. So the adults, the parents, the teachers, the coaches, and so on have to regulate that, have to be on the same page, and they have to promote the school first agenda, right? And that is that the sense that playing sports is a reward, it's an addition, it's an add-on, but a positive if one maintains one's marks. But again, many of the students or the student athletes are already kind of more highly driven and focused in that sense. So that's a good thing. And other research has shown that student athletes are more likely then to have stronger educational and career goals, even at a younger age. Most even aspire then to graduate from a four-year college or university or go on to some kind of professional program. Now, again, that in and of itself doesn't spell success, and not everyone obviously has to go to college. But the point being that there's a future, or they're imagining a future, and even in many instances, planning for a future. And that's a good thing, no matter whether you're playing sports or not as a young person. And then engaging in youth sports promotes physical fitness, and that has a positive effect on one's mental health as well. Okay, as we've discussed previously, and I'm sure you've seen elsewhere, regular exercise promotes the release of endorphins, which are these natural mood enhancers, and regular exercise can help them reduce anxiety and stress and depression. And ideally, and again, we have to be careful, youth sports allows young people then to experience friendly and positive competition too, which also can provide a healthy outlet for stress and frustration. Yes, but what about losing? Because we're all going to lose at times, right? No matter who you are, the best of the best sometimes going to lose, right? So here again, we can turn that into a positive as well. Ideally, children should be presented with challenges and obstacles to help them build their emotional control and resilience. So youth sports then offers another mechanism or a venue or an avenue through which young people can develop resilience. They can develop the ability then to cope more effectively with the challenges that they're presented with the different kinds of outcomes. Learning how to cope with failure, how to deal with the pressure, how to lose with grace and dignity, and just in terms of developing good sportsmanship habits in general. These are all positives that can be translated into other spheres of one's life. And then by being able to experience the different types of emotions and work through the different kinds of outcomes, good and bad, right? Children are then primed to become more emotionally stable adults. So I'm not saying that every youth, athlete ended up being a well-adjusted, healthy adult. But what I have found is that the opposite is often true. That is to say that many of the unhealthy, emotional, or otherwise adults that I've encountered did not have the benefit of youth sports. So it's kind of like, if you will, and by extension or by analogy, not having good parents. We all have different experiences with parents and the quality of parenting and quality of coaching. And some of us have the benefits or the luxury of having great parents, others not so much. So again, this all has long-term implications. And you can see then that, again, with youth sports, if you participate in a healthy environment with supportive coaches and so on, then you're usually going to develop into a healthier, emotional young person and hopefully young adult as well. And then also, this creates an incentive for young people to develop their own focus and mission statement around the kinds of people that they want to become in society. So in other words, the sports participation is in some senses a microcosm, kind of a lab, if you will, where children learn how to commit themselves to regular participation, showing up for the workouts, showing up for the practices, doing the things that one needs to do and maintaining that commitment in the hopes of aspiring some broader goal. And that, of course, is in general what we try to do as adults in terms of our lives, in terms of our families, in terms of our careers. So usually there's this notion then that if you can learn how to participate successfully in team sports as a young person, there's actually a correlation to becoming a more positive and contributing member to society down the road. And of course, there's the social aspect to youth sports as well, making new friends, meeting others from the school or from your neighborhood or beyond for that matter. Many of the friendships endure, of course, long after the season ends. Some of them, of course, become lifelong friendships. And along with the many different memories and the treasured experiences that can be drawn upon in the future. And there's also the aspect of building more positive connections with your communities and different people, but especially the volunteer coaches or just other parents for that matter. I have some good friends, well, many good friends that I grew up with, and one of the sets of friends I have became almost like a substitute set of parents. And actually, one of them, I won't name the names because I don't want to embarrass anyone or put them on the spot, but one of them actually traded to get me onto their team. I had no idea, but they knew I was a pretty good athlete, and so they traded to get me onto their team. But the best part about that was that they really took an interest. That is, this is a friend of mine's father, their parents took an interest in me as a young person. And so, yeah, I played on the sports team and I tried to help them win or whatever, but I benefited as well because I had, again, another set of really good role models to look up to and people who cared about me, who took an interest in me, not just in sports, but beyond. So yeah, ideally then you can the parents and the coaches and others are can become the trusted adults that young people turn to in times of trouble, in times of crisis, or what have you, and they become important role models in many instances. That's what I saw, at least. And I still remember the very best and my favorite coaches, and I remember their names and what kind of I have an image of what they look like all these decades later, just as I remember my best or favorite teachers as well. So yeah, this stuff, people really do have an impact. And sometimes you don't realize the impact that they're having, or that they've had upon you until much later in life. Okay? And then the benefits, from, especially from team sports, extend naturally beyond the field or the court and so on. Playing sports then helps young people to make quick decisions on the fly, helps them in terms of learning how to cooperate and work with others in a team environment. And these are positive environments too that are going to be, that are going to serve people well throughout their lives and of course in their careers. And then sometimes young athletes are going to face the discomfort from being in the spotlight, from having teammates rely upon them, from letting people down on occasion because they weren't at their best or whatever, right? Sometimes they're going to face disappointment. And sometimes they're also going to encounter the jerky, opposition or coaches or parents as well. But that's all part of life. We're not all well-adjusted Buddhas walking around with enlightenment flowing out of our fingertips all the time. So again, youth sports can be a microcosm for society writ large. And so hopefully these days, what we see is that young athletes know then that they have the full support of coaches and families, and ideally their teammates too. And so even if they don't do well or have a bad game or let them down, whatever the case, hopefully that kind of positive reinforcement once more helps them learn how to cope and deal with so-called failure, or helps them to redefine their experiences in more positive ways. So again, failure isn't, for me, it's never been about being a failure. It's about what can I learn from the mistakes that I made, or how I respond, or what are the pressure points? Where can I improve so that I can perform better, etc. Okay, I'm sure you understand the point. And in a healthy youth sports environment, then the tough losses, the injuries, I've been injured and had to learn how to cope with that. The other different kinds of experiences that you're going to have and that young people are going to have with youth sports will then ultimately and ideally help them build resilience. And again, that's the kind of resilience that stays with them long afterward and into adulthood. As Kevin Durant said, the great basketball player, some of you know Kevin Durant. So he stated once, so many people believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. So many people doubted me and motivated me every single day to be who I am. I failed so many times, but I learned and I got back up. I've been through the toughest times with my family too, but I'm still standing, end quote. So yeah, and then another benefit would be that youth sports can offer opportunities for young people then to develop their leadership qualities or skills in terms of keeping everyone working together on the same page, learning how to maintain the confidence and the morale of the team. These are important skills. Learning to work with people, of course, from different backgrounds and abilities. Why? In the effort to achieve broader shared goals. There's not much downside to any of that I can see. And so whether the young person becomes a team captain or not, there are numerous opportunities then to provide leadership within their teams. And of course, that spills over into other facets of their lives. And finally, and most obviously, there are the physical benefits, right? Helping youngsters move away, for example, from our more sedentary lifestyles these days. I have to confess that my one generational bias, if you will, I grew up with obviously without today's ubiquitous cell phones and laptops and the incredibly diverse social media landscape that dominates the world that we live in. And that's one thing I definitely would not change about my childhood. Some things I would change, but that would be one thing I definitely wouldn't change. And in fact, I would encourage that young people today should be as active as they could be because of the incredibly diverse benefits that stem from being more physically active. So when I was growing up, because we didn't have all these other distractions, as they're sometimes referred to these days, that meant that by default, I and my friends, we were always looking for something else to do. And that something to do typically involved being outdoors. And often that took us in the direction of playing sports together, competing with one another. And again, that's sometimes where I could be a jerk, but set that aside for a moment. But we still got back to, we loved to play sports, to get out there and be, and yes, we were competitive with each other, but the subtext of all of that was that we wanted to play together. We wanted to do things together. We wanted to be together. We wanted to have fun together, etc. And so, yeah, being outdoors and being active, and again, it didn't have to necessarily be sports too. It would just be riding our bikes around. That was a thing back in the day. Or we spent a lot of times hiking through the woods. Again, just goofing off and, loved the creeks and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, you know all of this, just being active. And that's what we would do. And so that's one thing, again, I definitely wouldn't change. And I would definitely encourage as much as possible in youngsters today as well. Since technology dominates so much of our contemporary life, an important negative is that children then actually do spend less time outdoors these days. And one study found that only about 1 in 3 children participate in daily physical activity. Now that just blows my mind. I couldn't imagine a day not doing something physically active as a youngster, or at least when I was growing up. But again, it doesn't mean that you have to be a fanatic either, okay? Even one day per week of regular exercise can be beneficial. But basically what we found is that youngsters who participate in sports regularly do in fact have lower body fat, have stronger muscles and bones, increased cardiovascular fitness, all of the benefits that you would expect from physical activity. And all of that, of course, then helps create a foundation for a healthier lifestyle down the road. And then finally, and most obviously as well, participating in sports, like in participating in learning a musical instrument or what have you, helps to develop motor skills, including the running, the jumping, the catching, the throwing, balance, and so on. And these skills then form the foundation for developing more advanced athletic abilities and capacities, if that's your interest. And that allows people then to go on to play at higher levels of sports or go on to play in university or what have you. I didn't go that far, but again, you have to start young, and ideally that sets the foundation for being able to accomplish more down the road. But again, what I'm talking about is just the ability then to develop a healthier understanding and relationship with one's body. And that starts, in my opinion, with youth sports. It's like learning a language, and much easier to do it when you're younger than trying to learn all of this later in life or get started when you haven't been doing it all your life. And of course, that also involves the importance of stretching and the movements that promote flexibility and improve the range of motion in our joints. And all of this is stuff that lasts a lifetime, at least potentially. So the younger the child starts in an athletic program, the easier it'll be for the body then to adapt to these movements. And so regular stretching should be a part of youth programs, just as it should be a part of your life as you get older as well. So in sum, the point here obviously is that participating in youth sports can help young people to develop the healthier habits that are going to last a lifetime. Often young children experiment with several different sports, but then they end up focusing on one in particular as they get older. And they continue to recognize that helping or working in this regard helps them gain new skills, and the more intense their training allows them to achieve higher and higher levels of performance. And this is the type of motivation and self-improvement that often persists long after participation in youth sports has ended. And it's certainly part of my life, even though I'm not nearly as active in terms of sports or team sports, certainly, as I used to be. And indeed, research has shown that the young athletes grow up to be active adults as well. In one long-term study, those who took part in sports between the ages of 9 and 18 were 5 to 6 times more likely to be active in their adulthood. In some cases, participating in youth sports just once a week led to a much higher level of being more highly active as adults. Right? So without question, then, physical activity early in life can lead to a healthier future. And if your children have a healthier future, that carries forward into not just their own lives, but in terms of the people that they become, their ability then to stick to commitments and ideally forge healthy personal and professional relationships. So remember all of this. And of course, it doesn't just apply to young people. This applies to us as adults as well, no matter what our ages might be. So stay active. If that's a challenge, then just find something that you know you really love to do, you've always liked doing, and that involves some type of physical activity. And then just do it. You'll see the payoffs almost immediately, especially if you've lapsed into a longer-term state of relative inactivity. Okay? So just as you wouldn't want your own children or grandchildren to sit around every day in front of a TV or a computer screen or scrolling through their phones and so on, apply that same principle and logic to yourselves. You're worth it. All right, as ever, until next time, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, and dole out hugs in abundance. And go be active too. After this vlog, I'm going to go out for a nice long run, dribbling my basketball. Some of you know what that's all about. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Ciao.